Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Yale University Community Breakfast. Our office, the Office of New Haven Affairs, hosts these breakfasts once a month on the first Thursday of the month during the academic year. And it's great to see everyone on the screen today. Feel free to turn on your camera. It's okay if we see you eating, drinking your coffee. I always think it's wonderful for the speakers to be able to see all the wonderful people who come out to learn more about their topic. A few announcements. Let me let this person in. A few announcements. First is our office, the Office of New Haven Affairs, hosts the Yale University President's Public Service Fellowship. Part of the process for setting up our summer program is inviting organizations to apply to host a full-time Yale student for the following summer. So we're inviting all New Haven nonprofits that are based in New Haven, that serve New Haven residents, to take a look at our application and apply to host a full-time fellow. The fellow is paid by the university, and the Yale students who are Yale undergraduates, graduates, and professional school students work full-time up to 37.5 hours a week at your sites. If you have any questions, I will put the link in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. The deadline is November 21st. Next is the Science Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale. Regularly hosts talks that the public is invited to. They're hosting the Planetary Innovator Speaker Series. The next topic will be hosted on November 10th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. It is in person, and it is talking about bioplastics. The topic is going negative for positivity, bioplastic innovation for a climate positive future. And the Sci Center for Innovative Thinking gathers people with diverse backgrounds and disciplines to help seek innovative ways to solve real world problems. So this would be a great in-person conversation for you to learn more, hopefully get your gears going to help move this cause forward. And finally, the Botany Rare Book and Manuscript Library is one of the many free resources that the university offers on campus to members of the community. They regularly host talks. They have tours every weekend. I encourage you to visit their website. The next talk of note, although they have many, will take place on Tuesday, November 29th from 4 to 5 p.m. Christina Sharp, who's the author of In the Wake on Blackness and Being, will be providing a lecture titled What Could a Vessel Be? Interesting, intriguing title. I encourage you all to come out for an in-person talk that is open to any and everyone. All that information will be posted in the chat. On to our wonderful speakers this morning. We have 3 speakers this morning who are talking on our topic. The first speaker is Tomomi Yoshida. Tomomi is a 4th-year PhD student in the Yale Immunobiology Department studying the role of immune cells that live inside the brain. She's looking forward to sharing her knowledge and engaging in a conversation about allergy and immunology. Yifan Ma is a 3rd-year PhD student in the Yale Immunobiology Department. She's working on elucidating the pathophysiology of anaphylaxis and acute allergic reaction. She's excited to discuss allergy and immunology with everyone as well. And Kenneth Zhou is a 4th-year PhD student in the Yale Immunobiology Department studying the science behind the antibodies that mediate allergy. He is passionate about science outreach and welcomes any questions about allergy and immunology. Please help us provide a warm welcome to this morning's speakers. A clap for everyone. Welcome.
Thank you, Karen, for the introduction. Let me share my slides. All right, Kenneth, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So just want to echo the thank you to Karen for putting this together, to the Community Breakfast Program for having us, and of course to those who are here, taking time out of your mornings to hopefully have a dialogue and a discussion about today's topic, which, as you hopefully can tell, is allergy. So Karen provided a wonderful introduction, so we won't dive too much into our backgrounds, but I think we'll just talk a little bit more about allergy as it relates to us specifically. So I'll let Tomomi start and talk about her own experiences there.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Maybe from Karen's bio, you learned that I don't really study allergy for my PhD project, but allergy is something close to my heart because I am allergic to many things, including cat dandruff, pollen, and I guess more importantly, walnuts. And I've anaphylaxed multiple times through accidentally consuming walnuts. And anaphylaxis is basically like a full body reaction against the allergen, including sort of hives, sort of a swelling of my throat and closing, so I'm not able to breathe, and then drop in blood pressure, so I get really dizzy and nauseous. And so I know, the scariness behind accidentally eating something that someone is allergic to and can anaphylax and undergo anaphylaxis from. So yeah, today I'm excited to talk about allergy in general, and what is happening in our body when we have these reactions. Yifan?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm Yifan. And thanks, Karen, for introducing us. So I study allergy because I feel like there are a lot of unanswered questions and very intriguing, and also very, very relevant to our daily life. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about more about allergy.
Yeah, and so kind of echoing both what Tomomi and Yifan said. So I myself also have had experiences with allergy in the past. So as a kid, I had pretty severe asthma, had allergies to cat and dog fur, so couldn't have any furry pets growing up. But even just, playing sports, really had a tough time, just feeling like I could get enough air to breathe, had to have an inhaler with me at night, would actually even have to sometimes go to a clinic to have a nebulizer put on so I could get these regular treatments. So this is definitely something that affected my personal quality of life in a different way than, say, someone like Tomomi who has food allergies. And that's kind of something we can talk about a little bit more as we get further into the discussion. And to that end, we just want to provide a quick outline of the discussion today. So we'll talk a bit broadly about what allergy is and entails. I think most of us have had some exposure to allergy, either through having it ourselves or a family member or someone we know who has it. And so I think there's a general understanding of what allergy is in practice, but we'll talk a little bit more about it from a biological and a public health perspective. And to that end, we'll talk a bit about the history and what we know about trends that have happened recently. And then because we are PhD researchers, we will talk a bit about the biology. We'll try not to put you to sleep. We're really just trying to hit the key players. So the cells and the molecules that are kind of in our bodies mediating these reactions that we actually experience as allergies. And then we'll kind of bring it to a close by talking about current therapies and diagnostics, as well as kind of what's on the horizon, and just some concluding remarks. But I kind of like past community breakfasts. This is meant to be a dialogue, like I said. And so if at any point there's something that we talk about that you're curious or you have more questions about, please feel free to interrupt. This is just a general structure to give you an overview, but this is really meant to, again, serve your interests. So yeah, like I said, please feel free to interrupt at any point. So starting off with this broad overview, although, again, you may have had some exposure to allergy, I think it's really kind of striking how common allergies are. So these are some statistics from Allergy in the US. So a child with allergic a child with allergic parents has a 70% chance of developing allergies. So this talks a little bit about the fact that there's a genetic component to allergy. It's not just purely environmental exposure, but still 70% is a very high prevalence. In terms of actually experience a reaction, every 3 minutes, a food allergy response actually sends someone to the emergency room. So this is something that isn't just, oh, I get hives or I get certain more superficial symptoms. These are things that can really be life-threatening. And then finally, again, talking more about trends, food allergy incidence in children increased 50% from 1997 to 2011. So over a relatively short period of time, about 14 years, that dramatic of a jump is, again, really striking. It's something that's kind of worth keeping in the back of your mind. So speaking of common, while we may not have all the answers to allergy, and this is something that we'll kind of hit on time and time again, allergy, there's a lot of question marks. There are some things we do understand. And in theory, people can have allergies to almost anything. I mean, there have been shown to be allergies induced from exercise or from water. But these are things that are less common. Most of the time when you hear about allergy, especially in the food context, you hear about allergies to one of 8 or multiple within this group of 8, which allergists refer to as the big 8. So these are things, again, that I think most of us have had some experience with or hearing about, peanuts, milk, eggs, shellfish, etc. And again, 90% of food allergy is to at least one of these 8 types of foods. And as for what makes these 8 foods so special in the sense that they are so commonly allergic, we aren't 100% sure, but research sort of points to this idea that these 8 foods contains proteins that survive digestion and actually get absorbed within the body, right? So when we eat something, it gets physically broken down through chewing. When it passes through our stomach, it gets broken down by the acids even more. And so a lot of the things within our food get broken down to a point where our body actually doesn't recognize it. And so if our body doesn't recognize it, there's not going to be an allergic response. These somehow survive that process to the point where they can actually get into our bodies, and then that's kind of where we see those symptomatic responses. And so speaking of which, you may actually be surprised, kind of, I was talking around it, but allergy is mediated by our immune system. And so this is kind of counterintuitive, right? This is a system that's meant to protect us against disease. Why would it actually, in fact, cause disease? So on the next slide, we'll kind of talk through some of these symptoms. Again, these are things that I think are intuitive to a lot of us. So reactions can include things like hives, swelling on the skin, coughing and wheezing in the airways, nausea and stomach pain in the GI tract, and just general dizziness and lightheadedness. These reactions can be triggered by eating, touching, and inhaling. And we think of these symptoms as kind of existing on a spectrum where, again, there are some more superficial symptoms that might be slightly unpleasant, but not life-threatening, but they can go all the way to an extreme and severe reaction, which medically is termed anaphylaxis. So this is just a term that refers to, again, this severe overreaction where things like drop in blood pressure and closing of the airways can be so severe that they do become life-threatening. So this is a point that we kind of want to harp on, in that I think, commercials and common media paints this picture of allergy as something that's just an annoyance, and for some it is. But it's really important to acknowledge that for not an insignificant number of people, this is something that really is, is anxiety-inducing, where potential exposure to something that's relatively common could lead to death. So yeah, this is just something that we want to harp on. And to that point, with this overall trend in rising allergy incidents, we also just want to point out that this burden is not felt equally. So socioeconomic status has been well demonstrated to show and shown to play a major role in both who gets allergy and how it affects them. So these are just some statistics curated by the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America. So African Americans are nearly 1.5 times more likely to have asthma. But on top of that, in addition, again, to getting the asthma, Black Americans are actually 5 times more likely to visit the emergency department. So there's this kind of double whammy where, again, some members of the community are more likely to both be affected by this and actually experience a reaction that's in the hospital. So this is, again, both race, socioeconomic status, and also sex, as shown on the right there. But kind of taking a step back and more broadly speaking, the incidence of allergy, as I alluded to in some of those statistics early on, has increased over time. And so on the left here is just a plot showing the disease burden of various infectious diseases, such as rheumatic fever, hepatitis, mumps, measles. And as you can see, there's really a precipitous drop from the mid-20th century to the turn of the 21st century. And what's interesting is in the middle here, there's a concomitant increase in various diseases, such as multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, diabetes, and asthma. And these are lumped together, not because the first 3 are allergies, but because they're all kind of, again, this misfiring of the immune system. So the first 3 are typically thought of as autoimmune diseases. So again, diseases where the body is reacting to something that's not harmful, often the case against ourselves. And in the case of something like asthma, reacting to something that's relatively harmless to us, like dander that's inhaled. And more specifically, on the very right, you can see again this this increase in the percentage of children with food allergies in the U.S. And so, of course, this begs the question: why, in such a short period of time, are more people susceptible to allergy in the modern day? And so, Tomomi is going to talk to you a bit more, kind of get a discussion going, and also give us our best guesses as to why that's the case.
All right, thanks, Kenneth, for the really nice introduction and for setting the scene. And so, yeah, based on the graphs that we showed in terms of the drop in infectious disease, but the rise in autoimmune disease and allergy, does anyone have an idea as to why you think more people are getting allergy these days? Yeah, I just wanted to open it up to see if anyone had any ideas. And sorry, I can't monitor the chat, so if someone types in the chat, would you be able to read it out, Kenneth?
Sure. Oh, I can too.
Oh, or yeah, thank you, Karen. Yeah, why are more people getting allergy these days? Anyone?
We eat more processed food.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a big thing. Yeah, so during the period of time, yeah, what we eat and the preservatives and chemicals that are in our food has drastically changed. So yeah, there are researchers studying how different preservatives might be sensitizing us to become allergic to different types of foods. So definitely, yes. Yeah.
In the chat, we have a couple other comments. Environmental factors is one. Another person said things we put out.
Yeah, environmental factors definitely, in addition to sort of food things, we have things in the air that are different now that things are industrialized and more things are being polluting our airs. We might be inhaling sort of chemicals and pollutants that can affect how, whether we get allergically sensitized to certain things that are normally harmless. So yeah, thank you all for the great points and for having an easy transition to me. And so scientists have a hypothesis as to why we see this increase in these autoimmune and allergy type of diseases. And it's basically a mix of a lot of the things that you all had mentioned. And so one big thing is also our microbiome and sort of the pathogens that we're exposed to. And so maybe if you remember the trend of decrease in infectious disease like hepatitis and other diseases because of rise in antibiotics, antiviral drugs, and general medical treatment, but we've become more conscious about being in keeping things clean, hand sanitizer and everything. But because of that, we're sort of not exposed to various microbes like we used to, and including through our food. And so one interesting study that highlighted that was a group basically compared the incidence of asthma in Amish community versus a Hutterite community. So they're basically both farming communities, but the Amish basically raise their children in a more sort of traditional, they have a lot of house dust mites in their house. They don't really, I guess they're not as modernized as the Hutterite community. And so their children are exposed to more of these environmental things that are more natural. And the incidence of allergy in this community is a lot lower compared to the Hutterite community, despite them both being farming communities. And so it seems like the westernized way of living, of keeping things clean, could seem to be affecting the way in which our immune system is getting trained. And as a result, we might be seeing an increase in allergy, and people are characterizing how does being exposed to these different sort of microbes, good microbes growing up, affect our immune system. And so, yeah, that's a big sort of topic, and people are actively researching on why, certain environments and certain sort of how the training of the immune system early in our childhood years is important. And then the other angle, so pollution and environmental exposure we talked about. But yeah, including our lab with Yifan and Kenneth and I are in the same lab, but we are studying, how different food preservatives can affect allergic sensitization. So putting sort of food preservatives along with the allergen, how that affects mice getting allergic to things. And it seems like there are certain preservatives that cause people to get more allergic. And so there's, ongoing sort of research on if there are certain things that we incorporate either in our diet or through our medicines or in our air, various pollutants that can affect us sort of getting allergy or developing allergy. So it's a really interesting sort of area of active research. And so the question is, how do we get sensitized to allergens? So we know, like I'm allergic to walnuts, but how did I get allergic in the first place? But it's actually very understudied. And so what scientists currently think is basically the allergen, so in my case, walnut, we think was introduced randomly along with an immunological trigger, so something that can activate the immune system. And people hypothesize that it can be through injury, some sort of infection, some inflammatory chemicals like we were discussing with the preservatives, and other unknown triggers. So it just happened to be this pairing of this, walnut, consuming walnut, and then something that the immune system was triggered by. And there's probably a lot of complicated signaling that and biology that happens, but it's very not well understood. And so scientists are actively researching it, and PhD students like Kenneth and Yifan are looking at this from different angles to figure out, how this happens. And then also in the, not just in the sensitization part, but also in, how we can help people who are anaphylaxing or people who are have more life-threatening disease, and how we can help people, sort of not be sensitized to them. So there's a lot of interesting angles that are being studied for this area. And so I'd like to dive into the biology angle. I hope I don't I don't overcomplicate things, but I want to basically mention two key players in why we get allergy. And these two immune cells are called B cells and mast cells. And first, I'd like to talk about B cells. So B cells are these immune cells that make these proteins called antibodies that you might have heard of that I'll talk about in a bit. But basically, when I mentioned there, when you consume sort of walnut or a peanut along with, and then you experience an injury or some immunological trigger, these B cells can get activated. And basically, if they contain, or if these B cells have antibodies or receptors that recognize the allergen, they can potentially start inducing sort of, the person can develop allergy because of this. And so, the main sort of role of B cells is to produce antibodies, but for those who aren't really familiar with antibodies, what are they? So antibodies are basically structurally look like this. They're Y-shaped. And so this region, if you can see my mouse, is where the allergen would bind to. And so normally in like a viral infection, antibodies are important because they're the ones that bind directly to the bacteria or virus or the cell that's being infected by it. And so the immune system, uses this to be able to flag viruses or bacteria, and recruit other immune cells to come and deal with it. And so in the traditional infectious disease setting, antibodies are important because they basically like red flags that immune cells sort of tag the virus or the bacteria that they're being infected by. And then this sort of red flag acts as sort of an eat me signal so that other immune cells could come in and deal with them. And so it makes the whole clearing of pathogen sort of viruses and bacteria a lot more efficient. But in the case of allergy, it's not really, you don't really want an eat me or a target me signal on a peanut because it's going to cause a lot of immune cell activation and damage. So a lot of the sickness symptoms that you experience, like the fever and the general sort of, feelings that you get when you get sick come along with immune cell activation. And so and why these antibodies, how are they used against viruses, bacteria, and allergies? So basically our immune system has this really complicated system where these B cells can make antibodies that can virtually recognize anything. And so this is evolutionarily adapted way of our immune system to be able to deal with certain bacteria and viruses that, we normally can't predict. So as you probably know or heard of, like the various variants that come with COVID or with the influenza virus. And so basically viruses and bacteria can evolve also. And so our immune system needs to figure out a way to also be able to keep up. And so the antibodies basically are genetically have this way of being able to randomly make sort of different combinations so that, we can be prepared and be able to recognize anything and mount an immune response against anything. But in the case of allergy, that's not really a good thing, right? Because if we can mount an immune response against peanut, that's why, that's how people get allergy, and that's why people can die. So this was something that was supposed to, be helpful and help us protect ourselves from future unknown variants of various viruses or bacteria. But in the case of autoimmune disease and allergy, these antibodies play a role in sort of causing the disease itself. And what's different is in like the fighting coronavirus or influenza or other sort of pathogens, there are different types of antibodies, and those are IgG antibodies. But in allergy, actually, the antibody class that causes a lot of this pathology is called IgE, and evolutionarily, it was thought to help clear parasites that we don't really deal with in the modern world anymore. But then these IgE antibodies, if your B cells make antibodies, IgE antibodies against a peanut or cat dust, it can basically cause all of the downstream symptoms that we experience. So, this is how, IgE is a specific antibody that is created against harmless things like peanut or house dust, etc. And so we talked about B cells and how, the secreting antibodies against the allergen is how they play their role in the pathology of allergy. But the second player that's important in causing our symptoms and how people can die are these mast cells. And so mast cells basically are sort of bigger sort of cells, and they store histamine and other chemicals in these granules contained inside of their cells. And you might have heard of histamine because one of the main sort of medicine you take when you experience allergic symptoms is Claritin or antihistamine drugs. And so histamine causes a lot of the allergic symptoms. And one thing that, mast cells do, and they sort of cooperate with B cells in this way. So when B cells secrete these antibodies against peanut into the blood, mast cells actually have sort of receptors, and they can grab these antibodies specific against whatever you're allergic to and co-opt them for them to use. And so in this way, they grab the B cells that are circulating, the antibodies that are circulating in the blood that can recognize peanut or some other allergen, and then they can use it for themselves. So once they detect peanut, the peanut binds to this antibody that they co-opted, and this causes their activation and the release of histamines and chemical granules that results in these symptoms. And so I have a cool video here. So if you can imagine, the peanut has bound to the antibody on the surface of the mast cells, and you can see them start to produce these granules with histamine and other sort of chemicals that end up causing allergic reactions. So these are the main players that make people who are allergic to things feel the symptoms that they feel. And the one important thing is also that these mast cells are located in barrier tissues, so primarily in the skin, mouth, GI tract, lung. And so that's why when we experience allergic symptoms, we get rashes or hives because mast cells are in the skin. And so when they degranulate and release their chemicals, we see sort of itchiness in the mouth, so in the throat. So we can see swelling and closing. The GI tract, for food allergy, we can feel nauseous and we can get symptoms like diarrhea. In the lungs, so also breathing becomes more difficult. And so a lot of the symptoms that we feel is because mast cells are located in these tissues, and when they recognize the allergen that they're specific for and do their job and release the granules, it acts on the more local sort of tissues where they're most prevalently found in the body. Yeah, and so they're primed to release these types of granules upon encountering the allergen. And, throughout this presentation, we've talked about sort of symptoms, but through degranulation and the releasing of many, many different types of chemicals, including histamine, it leads to various allergic symptoms. And like Kenneth mentioned, it's a wide spectrum. So depending on the person, you can experience different levels of these symptoms. But in the worst case scenario, anaphylaxis can result in sort of death through drop in blood pressure and sort of shock. And so, yeah, this sort of transitions to Yifan, who was talking about if you undergo certain these symptoms and especially life-threatening anaphylaxis, what can we do for you? So, Yifan, do you want to take it away for current diagnostic methods?
I can jump in here and speak really quick. Sorry, I changed
Sorry.
the slides last minute. Yeah, so Tomomi did a great job of talking about the biology. So now we're going to transition to kind of, again, in practice, how we actually try and diagnose and treat it. And so what's shown here is what's known as a skin prick test. Essentially, we know generally the actual protein that causes various allergies. And so a doctor will actually kind of on the forearm here as shown, mark different sections and then drop a particular allergen. And so you could test, a dozen different ones on your skin. And what will happen is, over the course of a few hours or minutes to hours, if you react, you'll actually see a hive, this sort of raised bump on the skin. So that will tell the clinician or the doctor actually what you're allergic to. So that's one common way. It's very visceral. You can tell, you can feel it. There's also just more obvious tests like a blood test where a sample is taken from you and then tests are run to see if you have IgE against whatever antigen, kind of like Tomomi mentioned. So now we'll transition from that to actually talking about treatments, which Yifan will walk through.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for laying the background. Yeah, so before we jump into the treatment, I'd like you to look at this graph. So like previously mentioned by Tomomi about the process of allergy development, now we can vaguely divide the phase of allergy into these 3 different states. So firstly, you are a healthy non-allergic individual, and through some incidents like previously described, immunological triggers, you got sensitized to specific types of allergens, and then you become someone with the potential to have an allergic reactions, but you're still healthy without getting in contact with the allergens. And then upon exposure to the allergens you're allergic to, your body will initiate an allergic reaction. And so that, of course, makes it obvious that the best way to deal with allergy is to actually avoid allergen exposure that will trigger unpleasant allergic reactions. Yeah. So allergen avoidance probably is the most cost-effective way and oftentimes the least suffering way we can utilize. And this means to purposely avoid the contact in any form of the things that might contain the substances that will make you have allergic reactions. But this oftentimes come at a cost of the drop of life quality to different degrees. For example, some might not get to taste certain good food, or if you have pets and you like develop an allergy to the pets. And so one specific product that have been developed for that situation is the pet dander remover to help with the decrease of the allergen around in the environment around you. And but if unfortunately a patient accidentally get exposed to the allergens, there have been multiple ways developed to contribute to the alleviation of the unpleasant reaction, like to reverse that in the second arrow in the previous graph. And yeah, thank you. So a lot of medications have been widely used for different types of allergic reactions. For example, you can go to, yes, thank you. For example, under a very acute situation, especially anaphylaxis, EpiPen is widely used to help increase your body, increase your heart rate and blood pressure, and to increase your blood pressure to a more normal range and help reduce the release of allergy mediators such as histamine. And, and then antihistamine is broadly used as treatment as well because it blocks the receptors for histamine, which is the major culprit for making you feel sick in allergy and preventing it from working. And except for the daily medication we use in our own hands, there are other powerful tools we can utilize and are currently undergoing multiple trials. These include antibodies that target the specific mediators that play a part in allergy reactions that makes it worse. So these all above treatment all serve to alleviate the allergy reaction by blocking the mediators that drive allergy. So now we have on this graph 2 strategies. However, they all just help you to go back to the middle state where you could still have severe allergic reactions the next time if you get exposed to allergens. The fundamental strategy that might actually cure the allergy is actually to find a way to reverse this arrow, meaning to make the patient not sensitive to the allergen anymore. And that would be what solves the problem from the source. So the current promising treatment is immunotherapy. The goal is to reverse sensitization. In other words, desensitization. The process of immunotherapy is literally giving the patients small dosage of allergen and increase the dosage over time. And this teaches our body that the allergen isn't harmful and help our body to tolerate it. For example, for peanut allergy, the allergen component extracted from peanut are used in this treatment. And depending on where to deliver the allergen, these therapies are divided into different types, such as oral immunotherapy, sublingual, epicutaneous immunotherapy, and etc. And there are multiple trials going on to test the efficacy and safety of these therapies. However, even though there is a great chance in achieving the desensitization in the end, if you actually go through the whole therapy, there is still high rate of allergic reactions happening during the period of the therapy. So oftentimes patients have to drop out before they could train their body to not respond to allergens. And that makes this treatment quite dangerous. So I put a red arrow here. So these are currently the most well-known strategies to deal with allergy, but there are actually a lot of missing pieces from this graph. For example, how sensitization happens is still a topic under heated investigation. There are a lot of studies going on to answer that question. And so far we have to come to you don't have to dive into any details in this graph. So far, I think we have come to realize that the sensitization involves different barrier sites such as the lung, the skin, and our guts, all of which are hugely exposed to outside world. And also people are elucidating possible mediators throughout the development of allergy step by step. So with the supplement of that knowledge in the future, hopefully that can add on more like precautious treatment to prevent the sensitization from happening at all. And also that could help us have a better understanding of how the desensitization could possibly happen to contribute to a safer immunotherapy. And recent researchers have also pointed out that there are other players in our body that are involved in the development of allergy. For example, our genes are playing a part. Some group of people are more susceptible to develop allergy, and microbiome, the bacteria that reside inside our gut, because they could also play a part because they are in close contact with the food that we intake and influence our body in different ways. And even our nervous system might be playing a role. And yep, those are all our current treatment and understanding of allergy. And next I'll hand over back to Kenneth. Thank you.
Yeah, so as you've heard, we've made a lot of progress into understanding how we get allergic in the first place, why we react. But there's still many remaining questions, both at a biological, like individual level, as well as a societal level. And these are some questions that presumably over the course of the talk or before you might have considered, right? So why do only some people get allergies? As we talked about at the beginning, it's known that there are some genetic and exposure factors, but that certainly doesn't account for the kind of differences we see. So that's something that both scientists as well as public health researchers are trying to get a handle on. In addition, why do some foods cause allergy? Again, we have some guesses, but it's not a sure thing. And sort of more relevant to a clinical context, right? What is the route of initial exposure that primes people for allergy? So kind of as Yifan talked about, sensitization is really where we want to be directing future treatments, because if you can prevent sensitization, you don't have to worry about IgE production. You don't have to worry about avoiding allergen exposure. You can really just, and kind of cut it off before it becomes a problem. And then conversely, we've kind of demonized IgE, right? It mediates all these bad reactions, but yet it's persisted in humans and in actually mammals, evolutionarily for a very long time, over 100 million years. And so it kind of begs the question, okay, if it's persisted for so long, actually maybe is there some misunderstood or unknown function that IgE is playing that we simply can't appreciate because we know all the downsides of having IgE? And so that can kind of be encapsulated with the question, what would the impact of its loss of be? And then finally, myself as a case study, why are some allergies outgrown while others last a lifetime? So now, thankfully, I actually grew out of my asthma, as some people say, and I don't experience those same symptoms, and I don't have the allergy. Actually, my roommate has a dog. And so if that were the case still, it'd be very unfortunate for me. So thankfully, for me specifically, just naturally, without any sort of treatment, it went away on its own. But why is that the case for me and not, say, for others like Tomomi, who still unfortunately suffers from some of those allergies today? And then just another point we want to hit on. So Yifan did a great job of talking through the kind of medical treatments, which obviously are very important, but kind of taking, again, a broader look on things. There are definitely some community solutions to allergy that can be implemented. As we discussed, the burden of allergy and its reactions is disproportionately felt. And so there's some kind of factors that mediate a lot of health inequities that could obviously help. So things like better access to healthcare, reducing income inequality, better housing situations. Those are things that, for obvious reasons, would help. But there are also some more allergy-specific solutions that researchers have come up with. So one obvious one is greater education for both medical professionals and community members. So allergy is also not diagnosed at equal rates. Someone in the chat, sorry, I didn't get a chance to mention earlier, when Tomomi was asking about potential reasons why the rates of allergy have been rising, they rightfully mentioned better diagnostic methods. That's absolutely the case. I think better awareness of allergy and better tools have helped us to, again, think of it more as a problem and really focus on it and have it in our minds, say, clinical professionals when they diagnose. But that's still not the case across the board. And so I think better education there. And then conversely, on the part of community members, I think, again, some of us may have this notion that allergy is something that's not a big deal. And if that's the case for us, that's wonderful. But I think in the case of, our kids, if they're feeling symptoms of things, I think if we can, in a culturally competent way, not just bashing people, but really trying to, in a community sense, teach people that, symptoms that your child might be feeling might be nothing, but it's simply worth discussing with their doctor. On top of that, federal food assistance programs currently make it very difficult for those who are on those programs to access foods that are free of allergens. And so again, better awareness and implementing that such that those who need the help can actually get it in terms of not feeding their children foods that might cause them to anaphylaxis. And then, of course, continuing research into allergy, both from a public health epidemiological perspective, as well as biology, to understand the underlying mechanisms that drive these responses.
Yeah, and so to that end, and also just talking about community solutions, as someone allergic to walnuts are hidden everywhere. And so I've unknowingly had pesto that was made with walnuts, and the menus don't really have a list of things that, and I would have to ask sometimes, but not all, I don't remember all of the time. And So yeah, it would be great for just in general for people to be more aware. And this is why I think we, students in the immunobiology department, we want to be able to sort of talk about different types of immunological diseases. And one sort of working group we have in our department, so we call ourselves IWGDI, the Yale Immunobiology Working Group for Diversity and Inclusion. And through sort of this, we have an outreach subcommittee. And right now we basically are planning this event called Day of Immunology. So unfortunately, it is exclusive to sort of Greater New Haven area public high school students. But if you know of sort of high school students or young sort of, high school students who are interested in sort of biomedical science or immunology, we had an event, inaugural event last year on Zoom virtually, but this year we're planning on having an in-person sort of one-day event where students can come in and sort of have this interactive workshops and activities to learn about your immune system. And we do definitely have an allergy module also. And so if you know of any high school students who might be interested in learning more about the immune system, like you all did today, please reach out to me and then I can send you the information as it comes out. But just wanted to highlight some ways in which we students and the department are working. And then another thing, so if you know of any sort of, this is also for community college students, but if you know of any community college students who are interested in immunology research or just research in general, we have ongoing sort of initiatives to help local community college students come into the lab and get sort of equipped with laboratory skills and learn more, sort of be in the biology, investigating the biology behind allergy and sort of the immunology. And so if you are also interested, feel free to reach out to me or anyone in this sort of Kenneth or Yifan, and we can direct you to the right people. But thank you all for your attention. And I couldn't see the chat throughout the talk, but if you have any questions, we'd love to talk through them. But thank you all so much.
Thank you all. That was fantastic. I do see a question posted in the chat from Claire Criscolo. She thanks you for the talk. She's wondering if there's research regarding the genetic modification of food. She's noticed a trajectory of allergies in line with the development and increase in GMOs.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that question. There's definitely been a correlation in the rise of allergy recently and also GMOs. But I do want to point out, I think GMOs inherently would not be more immunogenic. A lot of GMO modifications result in greater resistance to things like pesticides or just greater hardiness in general. So GMOs themselves have not been demonstrated necessarily to make them more allergic to people. A lot of the GMOs also are foods that aren't one of the big eight. There are with corn and tomatoes and certain crops, those are really more prevalent. What I will say is that, kind of to the point about greater resistance to pesticides, what some corporations have done is essentially, because they want to be able to use, say, a Roundup, they've made their own crops resistance to Roundup to the point where they can kind of just indiscriminately use greater amounts of those pesticides without it affecting their own crop yields. So something like that, yes, I could definitely see, the increased pesticide usage being an indirect cause of greater allergies, with all the chemicals that are kind of leaching from the environment. But I just want to point out that there's no demonstrable evidence that GMOs in and of themselves, the modifications to the food, causing allergy in individuals. But that is a great question. And that's something that appreciate the concern. But I don't think as of right now, there's any evidence to point to a direct connection there.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions?
So I can point out, I got a question, which is a really relevant one, which was asking about the pandemic and its impacts on allergy sufferers, which is, obviously one that's very relevant to us. And I would say, yes, definitely. When we were in more of a quarantine, not really going out period, it was very difficult, I think, for allergy sufferers to, get regular contact with their doctor and continue receiving treatments that they needed. But even on top of that, right, we typically think of COVID symptoms as being sort of affecting the airway. And so for those with asthma, I mean, that's just, bad on top of bad. So absolutely, if you're already having trouble breathing and coughing, getting COVID on top of that would just simply exacerbate that. So definitely, like with a lot of diseases, but specifically I think with asthma and its effects on the airway, definitely a demonstrated and a noted increase in sort of the overlapping symptoms there. So great question.
Thank you. Any other questions? You have the ability to unmute yourself, or you can put your question or comment in the chat. So you must have answered all their questions. I think it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. I definitely learned a lot. So we want to thank you again for joining us this morning, for enlightening us about this topic. I will, if you all are on the email list, when I send out the next community breakfast meeting notification, this video will be in the bottom of that notice so that you can watch this again and share it with friends and colleagues. I see a bunch of thank yous, great conversation, etc. So again, thank you to Tomomi, Yifan, and Kenneth for joining us this morning. And we all hope to see you at our December breakfast. So enjoy the rest of your month. Thanks again.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.